as we bring in Nugsy, the voice of the Notre Dame Hounds, and the Moose Jaw Warriors beat writer at dubnetwork.ca. The one thing we do here, Nugsy, and you've been watching this show long enough, is that we don't try to be the anti-TSN per se, because it's not like we're adversaries of TSN, but we talk about all the leagues that the TSN does not. But speaking of TSN, Nugsy, you must have seen today the news that veteran sports broadcaster Brian Williams announced his retirement this morning, ending a 5-decade career that saw him rise to prominence as one of Canada's leading authorities on the Olympic game. Williams covered his first Olympics in 1976 in Montreal and was the principal studio anchor for 13 games with both CBC and CTV, and also a longtime host of the CFL coverage on CBC and later TSN. Kudos to Brian Williams on a long career. I'm going to ask you if you have a Brian Williams story, but I'm going to go first with mine. I've got a couple. I've been around Brian Williams for years and years and years. I'm not going to say he's as classy as he appears on TV. He's more classy in person. Brian Williams is as polished as they come. And I've been around broadcasters, obviously, my whole life. But two things come to mind. One, Ducks Unlimited Banquet several years ago. I was the MC. Brian Williams was the guest speaker. He was like coming unglued. It was at the Delta Hotel, and the night was dragging on and on and on. You know how these things go, right, Nugsy? And he's like, Rod, you got to get me on stage. Rod, you got to get me on stage. And I'm like, Brian, I don't know what you want me to do. I know that I'm the MC, but I can't hurry up what they're doing out there. This is a major fundraiser out there. It's like 10:30. He's like, Rod, you got to get me on stage. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Brian. Of course, by the time he got on, he absolutely crushed it, and he was amazing, but he was hyper nervous about this. Well, what he was worried about was everybody was going to be too smashed and in the bag and not able to enjoy his speech, which he got up, he crushed it. Everybody enjoyed it, obvious. And another one was, this just came to mind. Don't think less of me, okay? But he left his briefcase in the Rough Riders PR guy's office. He came in to do a Rider game. It was the day before the game. And one of the Rider players, who will remain nameless, came into the PR guy's office, saw the briefcase with the name tag, Brian Williams, TSN, on the name tag. And he goes, watch this. The Rough Rider took his pants off, took off his underwear, and stuffed it in Brian's briefcase. Put his pants back.
Oh.
We laughed about that for years. Never mentioned it to Brian again, but we've often wondered what he thought when he got back to his hotel room and opened up his briefcase, and there was a pair of extra large men's underwear in his briefcase. The fun and frivolity of being around sports teams. Do you have a Brian Williams story?
Yeah, he came and spoke in 2012. I did the sports journalism program at Centennial College with Malcolm Kelly there in Toronto, and he came and spoke. And I've talked to you about this a couple times, Rod, when we can break bread. The thing that I respect the most about any broadcaster isn't what they say and how smart they are, the points they make. It's longevity, and obviously he's got that longevity, and he had so many tips. And the one tip that he always that he mentioned that always stuck out to me was when he was doing the Olympics, how he would always check his watch. Just a simple, small thing to keep, pass some time when he needed to. It's 6 p.m. here in Tokyo, and it's 5 in the morning or whatever, and just a little detail like that a veteran broadcaster like that could pass on to learners like us. And again, it just very, very generous with his time, very, very generous with his sharing as well. It was great to listen to him.
I was frankly just stunned that he always remembered me. I was stunned. He's got that kind of memory, man. Because there's a lot of those national guys that I've met. I've met them 14 times. You know what I'm saying? Brian Williams, one time, and it clicked. He's just very charismatic. I'm just going to some of the YouTube viewers here. By the way, we're into Taco Time viewer takeover. Burrito Thursday at Taco Time. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But from Chris Bird. Oh, hang on. Nelson Hackowich says, without Brian Williams, who will tell us what time it is across the country? Good morning. It's 11 a.m. here in Toronto, 9 a.m. on the West Coast. We used to see Brian before I was in broadcasting, just as a fan. We'd be yelling, hey, Brian, what time is it in Newfoundland?
Love that. Nobody checked his watch more entertainingly in the history of broadcasting than Brian Williams. It's
7 a.m. here in London.
Love it.
Yeah. From Creation Guy watching on YouTube says Brian Williams attacked the CFL every Grey Cup broadcast. Attacked the CFL? I don't really remember that. We have different memories of that. I don't remember Brian ever attacking the CFL. John in Edmonton says, speak of the NLL, Rod. TSN doesn't. Well, we just had Mark Matthews on yesterday of the Saskatchewan Rush. We're big backers of the National Lacrosse League. I really hope they get an NLL team in South Florida. I would be all over it. From Randolph Charles watching in Ontario, the Argos have more tradition than any pro team in North America. Weren't they about 35 years old when the Saskatchewan Roughriders were born? Like the Packers, they should have waiting lists for their tickets. Nugsy, you would be a great guy to ask this as a Toronto guy, but you lived in Saskatchewan for now, going on 4 years, and both your kids born in the rectangle.
Yep.
And you are a Canadian football fan. How did the Argos get lapped? How did the CFL get left behind in this sports landscape across Canada? As a guy that's from there, and you've worked at Sportsnet.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in the John Candy, Wayne Gretzky, years in the 90s, it was rocking. All my friends, we'd come over and we'd watch, Doug Flutie and, pinball, and it was awesome. It was rocking. It's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think it might, there's always that problem in Toronto where there's just so much competition for eyeballs. And I think the ownership there and the marketing that they did then, brought a sexiness to it. It's interesting. I remember living not like 10, 15 minutes walk from BMO Field, the last place I lived in Toronto before I moved to Saskatchewan. And, honestly, I think I saw more Rough Riders jerseys walking by my apartment than the Argos. And I went to one of the last games at Skydome, and there was about 7,000 people there in a 55,000 seat stadium. It's just competition for eyeballs, and obviously I come on here. I love Toronto, and I miss it, and I would love to live there again one day. But people in Toronto are big time sports snobs, and there is certainly a perception in Toronto among a lot of people that the CFL is minor league. Like, I'm not saying that. I don't believe that. I love the CFL, and I definitely love Canadian university football. But there's a lot of people in Toronto that consider it minor league compared to the NFL, and the way it's marketed, compared to the way the NFL is, maybe it needs. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So, I think it has more to do with the success of the NFL than anything.
Yeah, well, they need some help from the broadcast partner, but I saw it front row seat where they got lapped in terms of the fantasy component, just the digital age and social media. They got left behind, and now it's very hard to catch up. Nugsy, in the time we have left, and to our viewers, Michael Dick coming up, the head coach of the Vancouver Giants of the Western Hockey League and Lethbridge Hurricanes. Give me a little bit of a junior hockey perspective here. Now, you are an Ontario guy, Toronto guy. You worked for 3 Junior A teams in Toronto, but you're traveling the province with the SJ. You're covering the Warriors in the Dub. What's the junior hockey scene? And let's start it with this. Connor Bedard named to the 35-man World Junior roster, tryout camp roster. How's that gone over there?
Yeah, you know what? I'm really excited for Connor. I think back to when Nathan McKinnon was a 16-year-old in Halifax, and I was actually there to watch him play a couple games in Halifax because a good friend of mine was doing his master's at the University of Acadia, and there was so much pressure, and he's got to be Crosby, he's got to be this, got to be that. The Mooseheads weren't great, and he had to do too much. He had to play too many minutes. He had to play too many heavy defensive minutes down low when he was just a kid. He was, skinny, probably needed a couple of ham sandwiches, and eventually, obviously, Nathan McKinnon figured out that he just needed to be Nathan McKinnon, just be himself. Now, we fast forward to the present, and I think Hockey Canada knows that Connor Bedard will be on this World Junior team. He will have a role that is much simpler and suits him a lot better on Team Canada than it does maybe on the Pats as a 16-year-old kid with all this pressure in the world and all this ice time where you just say, go out and score goals. And you know what, Rod? Like, he's going to be on this team. They wouldn't bring him up to the camp if they weren't going to put him on the team, and he's going to just play with some great players, Cole Perfetti or McTavish or Nate or Wright, one of those guys, and they're going to do a lot of heavy lifting for him, going to give him the puck, and he's going to absolutely light it up. And I'm just so excited for Connor that he can actually take a deep breath and just play hockey and not worry about being trying to save the world here in Regina. So I'm really excited about that.
He did it at the World Under-18s.
Yep.
As an underage last year, the player of the tournament leading Canada to gold. Now, give me a junior A landscape. What are you seeing out there in the SJ? People are saying there's a financial concern, obviously, through COVID. What's any talk there? And Estevan, of course, hosting the Centennial Cup. So tracking towards a great tournament. Yeah.
James Zylstra on YouTube. Carson Lambos is on that team, and I think he'll make it first-round pick. As well, great defenseman. To answer your question, Rod, the attendance has been pretty bad, especially in certain areas of Saskatchewan where the vaccine is not the most popular thing in the world. But I think the league is doing great. I think the Humboldt Broncos have done a really nice job reloading really fast. I think Jason Tatarnic and Estevan is, doing his best to make sure that the Estevan Bruins acquit themselves well at the Centennial Cup. Of course, they're going to host it. So they've been red hot. And Braden Klamosko, your buddy and mine in Battlefords, they've really loaded up and they've been red hot lately. And then in Flin Flon, Mike Reagan, again, always such a good deep team. So, those are sort of the four teams that are at the very top that are kind of going to distance themselves, I think, as we go along here, Rod. But it's been great hockey. It's been a lot of fun. The quality from some guys coming back down from the Western Hockey League and the major junior ranks has actually added to the league a lot. It's been a lot of fun to be around, and obviously you came out and did color a couple times already for me with the Notre Dame Hounds Junior A. Really appreciate it. All the boys and all the families and all the fans really appreciate having you on, and I know you enjoyed watching them too because they play a fun brand. So the parity in the league is absolutely suffocating, Rod.
Yeah, it's like I see it. The standings are like this, and they're changing a lot. And to be honest with you, it's something that I learned from my dad, that at all levels of hockey, to enjoy it. And so whether it's the Notre Dame Hounds or the AAA Pat C's, or tonight the Florida Panthers and Buffalo Sabres that I'll be going to at FLA Live Arena and thoroughly enjoying that. You can tell, I'm down videoing the Notre Dame Hounds coming out of their locker room, going onto the ice, and then doing the exact same thing with the Florida Panthers. I can't believe how great the Panthers are treating me down here. It's fantastic. It's it's just been amazing. Nugsy, as always, loving the visit, my man. Go let you get back to your ever-growing family, and go Hounds. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for having me, Rod. Really appreciate it.
Jamie Neugebauer, voice of the Notre Dame Hounds, and from dubnetwork.ca joining us.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of The Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.